You're listening to Colored Commentary, a Threaded podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Threaded and the ways to support and donate to this organization, check out wearethreaded.org. Now, here's the show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are here in Colored Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I am one of your hosts, Mr. Marcus Lloyd, and with me, as always, is Mr. Antoine Malone. What's happening, Antoine?
Yo, what's up? So when you said colorful right there,
yeah,
I thought you said,
did I say
colored folk for a minute?
Well, I mean, I guess depending on who you're talking to.
No, there was, by the way, there was someone who used the word colored in some legal proceeding recently, and it was a whole weird thing. Anyway,
Like, were you there at the legal proceeding?
No. It was something in Congress or something. I don't remember what it was. But if you just Google it and find it, but I guess I don't know that we're not at a space right now where someone used the word colored. It's enough news to really talk about. But.
Right, and particularly like older. I'm not gonna say even older. The
guy looked like he was late 30s.
Yeah, I had a cat at my church that kind of just used the word colored. Like I think people get caught between words.
Yeah,
they're not quite sure what to use, right. And so they just throw it. It almost like their brain just malfunctions, and I don't know if it's like the baseline version that's in them. That's just the default version comes out, the uncensored. So I was actually appreciative that colored was the word that came out.
Let me help anyone who's listening.
All right,
who might find themselves in such a brain spasm. Don't go with colored. Colored. Yeah. It's not the safest one. So,
right.
Although I just listened to Floyd Mayweather. That's him.
That's
Mayweather.
His name.
Yeah, I was about to say Merriweather.
Oh, well,
but
no, that's
Floyd. He was talking about. There's this video on. I think it's TikTok. I think I saw it on TikTok.
All right.
He's like, I don't want to be called African American.
Yeah,
and then I was talking to at the church I work at. I was talking to the barista, and she was talking about how she had friends and they don't want to be called African American. They were very adamant. Don't call me African American. So I remember having that conversation in the early 90s, I think it was, when we was trying to decide African American, Black, like what do we want to be called? And so that conversation is coming back up among the young people, it seems.
Yeah, it's a moving target to some capacity. I mean, every 2 decades, every generation, it kind of maneuvers. I think I did something for the Threaded Collective once. I did a thing like, what do I call you? Like a video. And I think I kept saying like, this is what it is, September 2022. You know what I mean? Like, this is what it is. Because it moves. Because we don't have to spend a show on it. But, I for years have said to people like, what do I call people who are Black? And I said, call them African American, because I'm like, as many syllables as you can get in there, the better, because the shorter syllables tend to make people get people a bit more triggered. But who knows nowadays? But
who knows?
I'm
cool. I'm cool with. I mean, African American is fine. Yeah. African American sounds like you're trying to be respectful.
That's what I'm saying. More syllables.
Like you're saying. And Black though, I'm kind of hey, I'm a Black dude.
Yeah, I like Black American. If I'm going down there,
you want to put the American on
I more syllables. Like, I just want anybody who comes up to me, I just need my own buffer. Like, I need help with not being triggered. So if you come up to me, you're like, the Blacks are doing whatever, I'm like, ooh,
slow down.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is something.
Something just stood up.
So, did you feel it?
I
felt it, right?
There was something in there.
Yeah. So,
but see, that was because you said Black that way.
But that's what I'm saying.
It's how it's said.
Of course.
It's not what you say.
Well, but I mean, even when people come in and like half-heartedly do it, where they're like, the Black people.
Yeah, I was about to do the exact same thing. The second and third guess the Black.
Yeah. Let me. I'm almost more offended by that. I'm like, why are you? Why are you taking so much time on that?
I mean, I know. I wish it's such a weird thing, for the people who don't. I know the people who don't mean any harm by it. They're the ones who are sitting here trying to like, let me find the right word so I don't miscategorize myself.
Right.
And the people who are the problem, they're like, whatever, man.
They coming right out.
Whatever I call you.
That's
colored.
Is it. They all
you are colored. I don't know what to do with colored. That's it.
Like I was saying, product of sin. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
true.
we create in some ways the sin of our forefathers, if you will, in this social creation, this false creation of a category of hierarchy of value called race, brought lots of things into the space. You know what I mean? And one of those is we have a hard time even communicating with one another, trying to describe the beauty of the difference between each of us, right? The skin color is actually an intentional thing that God downloaded into the very DNA of humanity for us to have, and we can't even comment on it because our sin has created this, right?
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we're talking about today. I mean, here we are, sixth season, Antoine.
Sixth season.
Yeah. Of
if
color
you guys,
commentary.
by the way, if you missed the first episode of this season, which is an episode about a black dude that interviews
Daryl Davis.
Yeah, black dude named Daryl Davis, who's been doing this for years. Interviews
and befriends
That's a key.
Yeah,
that's a key deal. Interviews and befriends KKK members. And has the
every
robes
time somebody says that out loud, it just makes me
weird. Yeah, and has the robes of the KK members.
You got the receipts
to
in
prove
robes.
It, right? He's got I think over. I'm just going to say it's more than this, but I'm just going to say over 50. It's like 80, I think, is what he said.
As far as his robes,
yeah, as far as his robes, but he's talked to or affected 250
right
plus. But yeah, so if you missed that interview, that's a fascinating interview.
Yeah, go back.
You do need to go and listen to that.
Yes, go back and listen to it. Lots of very overt racial implications in the midst of that particular conversation. And today, actually, we're going to continue that motif. I guess the KKK. No, we're not going to continue. We're not. I don't know if we're going to mention the Ku Klux Klan. I don't know if we're going to get to mention it or not. But we're going to talk about
somebody in there like, is he getting tickled? What's going on with? That was Chris Rock.
Chris Rock.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know,
y'all don't know Chris Rock. The Ku Klux Klan. So we're gonna talk about something that's not quite as hilarious.
Okay,
don't do it.
Don't do it. Where we were at the beginning.
I know. You went right back to it. So we'll talk about a couple things in the news. It's just us today. Not just us. It's us today, which is good. You know what I mean? We like it. We like to do it.
This is the normal.
I like that. That's right. We've been doing a lot of interviews.
This is the privilege.
So what's in the news today that we're talking about? First, Antoine, if I could, just the other day, President Joe Biden issued this Emmitt Till Day, if you will, the creation of Emmitt Till Day, but also these monuments and memorials to recognize the situation, the death, murder, and the systemic racism, political systemic racism that was experienced in the midst of the Emmitt Till murder. And so I don't know, I don't want to assume that everybody's seen this, that everybody even knows about Emmitt Till. I'm always amazed at I shouldn't say amazed because that may separate people. We just don't get a lot of really good articulation of the history of race in this country and the history of racial animus and terror in this country. So what I want to do is I want to just kind of, just in this first part of the show, if you don't mind, I want to read excerpts from what came out of the White House based on some of the things around Emmitt Till. It'll take just a second.
Okay.
I'm a voiceover guy, so maybe this is fine, and they're just listening to voices anyway.
Man,
so it's just me
man.
reading, I guess, is fine. What it is.
Yeah.
So
people love to hear you talk.
Oh,
they love your voice.
All right, where they go. So let me just read just a little bit from it, just to kind of give you guys a setup of what this whole situation is looking like, and there's kind of three major parts to it. So. In August 1955, when Emmitt Till was 14 years old and on a summer break from school, he convinced his mother to let him visit their extended family who lived in the Mississippi Delta, more specifically, Money, Mississippi. On the evening of Wednesday, August 24th, 1955, Emmitt joined his cousins, Maurice Wright, Wheeler Parker Jr., and 12-year-old Simeon Wright, and several of their friends to buy candy at Bryant's Grocery and Meat Market Country Store in Money. Carolyn Bryant, the white store clerk, claimed Emmitt made inappropriate advances toward her. and claimed a claim disputed by Emmett's cousins and friends. According to Till's cousin, Wheeler Parker Jr., 14-year-old Emmett whistled at Bryant outside the store, which violated the unwritten laws of segregated society in the Mississippi Delta. The group quickly loaded back into their vehicle and fled. At about 2:00 a.m. on Sunday, August 28th, now this is 4 days later, Antoine, August 28th, 1955, the Wright family this is the family that Till was staying with. The Wright family was awakened by two armed white men, identified by Moses Wright, this is Emmitt Till's uncle, as store owner Roy Bryant, husband of Carolyn Bryant, the store clerk, and his half-brother J.W. Milam. Moses Wright testified that the two men were armed with a gun and a flashlight and were looking for the boy, quote, the boy that done the talking down at money, unquote. The two white men directed Emmitt Till to get dressed, abducted him from the Wright home, and drove away with him. Moses Wright notified the county sheriff. Within 48 hours after the abduction, J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant were arrested on kidnapping charges, and the news of Emmitt Till's abduction began to hit the newspapers locally and in Chicago. On Wednesday, August 31st, 1955, Emmitt Till's body was pulled from the Tallahatchie River in Granville Landing in Tallahatchie County. Moses Wright confirmed that the badly beaten body was that of his grandnephew, Emmitt Till. Emmitt Till suffered a brutal murder. His body was found with barbed wire tied around his neck and attached to a 70-pound cotton gin fan. At a 2005 autopsy, prompted by the reopening of the investigation by the FBI, revealed fractures on both of Emmitt's wrists, a fracture on his left femur, multiple fractures on his skull, and a gunshot wound to the head. Almost immediately after Emmitt's badly beaten body was recovered, the county sheriff directed that he be buried quickly. His body was prepared by the Tutwiler Funeral Home, and a grave was being dug at the local Church of God in Christ Cemetery in Money when Mamie Till Mobley contacted her Mississippi family, interrupting the burial process and insisting that her son's body be returned to Chicago. Mamie met her son's body at the train station in Chicago and confirmed his identity. Defying orders from the Tutwiler Funeral Home to keep the casket sealed, Mamie decided to hold an open casket funeral. When the funeral director asked if he should retouch Emmett's distorted face to make him more presentable, Mamie Till Mobley responded, "No, let the world see what I've seen." The funeral service for Emmitt Till began Saturday, September 3rd, 1955, at the Roberts Temple Church of God in Christ in Bronzeville, a historically Black neighborhood on the Chicago South Side. Roberts Temple played a predominant role in Chicago's Black community, and the church grew considerably during the Great Migration. When Mamie Till Mobley arrived at the funeral service, the church's 1,800 seats were overflowing, and an estimated 5,000 additional mourners gathered along the adjacent sidewalks, streets, church property, and surrounding blocks. Due to the overwhelming turnout, Mamie delayed Emmett's burial to allow more time for mourners to pay their respects. Press estimates the crowd ranged from 10,000 on the first day to as many as 125,000 people over the next 3 days before Emmitt Till's burial on Tuesday, September 6, 1955. The trial for the murder of Emmitt Till began just weeks after his lynching on September 9, 1955, at the Tallahatchie County 2nd District Courthouse in Sumner, Mississippi. On September 23rd, this is 4 days later, 1955, after, a 5-day trial, an all-white jury acquitted Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam of Emmitt Till's murder after just over an hour of deliberation. In January 1956, just a few months later, following their acquittal, Bryant and Milam gave a paid interview to Look magazine in which they confessed to the murder, further underscoring the miscarriage of justice. Eyewitness accounts that additional people were involved in the kidnapping, torture, and murder of Emmitt Till were omitted from the magazine article and never pursued by officials. What do you think about that?
Well, the Emmitt Till story is always tragic to hear and, moves emotionally. I can't help but connect an open casket of Emmitt Till to the Dr. King movement, where a big part of that movement was to show the world the ugliness of racism. by revealing its ugly, effects. And so whenever I hear that, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's one thing to have that happen and to go through the emotional content. And it's another thing to say, man, in order for us to really feel what we ought to feel about the issue, we have to see things like Emmitt Till and his body and in order to move. And even here, like immediately that wasn't enough in this immediate scenario to really lead to the right kind of justice these guys get off and so forth and so on. So I always think the Emmitt Till is just a tragic story and just a reminder of where we are and how much, of the progress or the process that the country has been going through in this space.
Yeah, Emmitt Till is one of those, I have of course, I've got a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old boy. Emmitt Till is one of those stories that I don't really desire to explore too deeply. I say this a lot, like if you grew up in that time, and even some of the time of early life of my own, like if you explored your feelings on some of the things that you constantly see happening around you, you got two choices. Either you drown in depression or you explode in rage. And so there's a sense of like not wanting to explore it because the full emotions of it, you don't know what it'll create. It's why I really kind of, I was telling you earlier, like I've put off watching the Till movie because I knew what the scenes would be. It was exactly what my own versions in my head are.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like particularly, and I try to tell people this all the time, like there's a collective thought process, right? You've got individualism, which most Anglo Americans have an individualistic sort of way of thinking about things, a cultural value of individualism. These are not wrong. These are just the way things happen. Black Americans, African Americans, there's a collective connection. In fact, most of the world has a collective value where they think of themselves as part of a group.
Right.
And so when you hear about Emmitt Till, you can't help but to put yourself in that situation. You go, okay, if I lived in Mississippi at that time, which again, my family were in Texas, kind of the slavery went through Texas. It could have happened in Texas, could have happened anywhere. But definitely if you're thinking of Mississippi, I'm thinking about a couple of characters in that story. I'm thinking about the grand uncle when those men showed up to his door, like he's asleep, right? Slumbering, having a good night, bang, 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 bang. Now in Mississippi, that can mean anything. But if you get in a bang, bang, bang in the middle of the night for anybody, you're already afraid of what is going to happen.
Right.
So you show up and these guys are like, we're looking to take one of the children in the house. It's not one of your children. It's a child. You're supposed to be watching for your family member. Right. They're visiting.
Right.
And you can't do anything to stop it. Nothing. They came in with guns, flashlights. They own the place because they do. And they just took this child out of his bed, 14. Because, years ago, they used to talk about, oh, Emmett was like 19, 20. It's 14-year-old. They take your 14-year-old grandnephew off to do who knows what. It's going to be bad. Yeah, you may not think he's going to die, but you think it's possible.
Yeah, it's not good.
It ain't no good. And he's and when you look at the movie, he's the granduncle's like, don't say anything. Don't make him more mad. He couldn't do anything. The helplessness. And his cousins, there's 4 other boys, there's 3 other boys. There are 2 white dudes, and there are probably 5 people in the house, and those 5 people cannot do anything. The helplessness of having to watch your cousin be taken out to never know if you're going to see them again, and you can't do anything. Like that's the thing that drove me when I watched the movie. That's where I kind of balled up.
Yeah.
And I was cursing, if you will. And that was life.
Yeah.
It's not an isolated incident, right?
Yeah.
Like this is
interesting. Like in the movie, you see the response of that uncle is, I don't want to say rehearsed, but someone comes to my house today, right? Somebody comes to my house today and they try to pull that, there's a certain way we're going to respond. It's like, this is not normal, right. This is not. And in a way, he seemed to be working off of a kind of playbook for how to, and not really a playbook, but his response is like, you could just tell that this is the sort of thing that he's used to dealing with, this sort of, this sort
intrusion.
of intrusion. Yeah.
Terrorism,
disrespect for himself and his property and his things. And it's always interesting to watch how people are responding to moments like that. And it's that time period, something like that to happen, you just managed the situation,
right?
As best you could, and so different and weird to the way we would do it today. We probably look to argue with them, and the uncle's trying to diffuse, and
right.
it's a very interesting kind
of. The wife comes in and he's like, "Don't get in this."
Right. We don't want any trouble. And so it's an interesting response.
Well, it speaks to me of that kind of term, racism versus racist. Racism is more, I always kind of think of it more systemic. I remember having a conversation with someone at a church I was working at, and they were trying to talk about racism. And I think we had years ago when we did a show, this conversation around racism, but prejudice with power. And so in that moment, it's that place of the power is really what's the thing that's most feared. Because again, they could have overpowered these gentlemen and gotten to keep their nephew, but what would have happened? More white people would have shown up and overpowered them. And let's just say that even the community could overpower.
Right.
You've still got the government was on the side of the white person. Yeah. It's just like one of the things that the movie shows, and it talks about a little bit in this monologue that I just read here. Whenever Emmitt Till whistled, like the scene's great in the movie, like all the black people were sitting outside the store. There's probably like 12, 13 of them. When he whistled, they all stopped and looked at him. And the woman came out and she started going for her car. And one of the guys says, she's going for her gun. And everybody fled. They got in their cars, took away. And I was sitting there like, there are 12, 13 of y'all.
Yeah.
Right? You could have easily stopped her from getting her gun, but they knew instinctually that if they put their hands on her to stop her from shooting them, that they would all be killed with no justice. There was no government, there was no police, there was no entity that was going to come to their rescue. And so they had to do everything they could to survive, which is a lot of kowtowing, a lot of intrusion, the allowance for terrorism. It's why, and I mentioned it in the monologue, there's this great migration. It's why Emmett was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So many people of color had to live that life that they migrated. It's one of the great refugee moves of the 20th century, if you will. And it was done inside of the national boundaries of America, because the greatest act of terrorism ever on this country has been white supremacy.
Yeah.
And so it just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
And so that's where this prejudice with power, as much as if you have a judicial system that you don't believe will support you, then it doesn't matter what you do eventually. And let's say it's a white jury system or a white judicial system, because I was saying this to one of my elders one time. I can fight against my elder. I can be a boss I can be a CEO of a 500, top 500 company.
Yeah.
And I can be black, and I can treat people any kind of way because of the color of their skin. But ultimately, there is a law that's above me, and if that law is all white, then I will get stopped in that, because as a person of color, I'll get stopped.
Yeah.
But if I'm the power above me, but if there's a CEO that's white and treats everybody bad, and the power above them supports that, then he or she gets to just keep doing it.
Right.
That's where I think this prejudice with power
to the conscience of the individual.
Correct, because the power is going to support it. The power is going to stop me from doing it, but it's going to support, say, a white CEO from doing it. So I don't know. And so those are the things when I think about the Emmitt Till case. And so, I mean, any response to that before?
And that's the part I think people have it's interesting. I was going to say people have a hard time dealing with, but I don't think they have they don't want to see it from the racial lens. The same persons who are like, oh man, individualism, I'm not racist. These are the people who say things like the deep blue state. Or these are people who still say things like the communists want to take over our country, right? These are the similar vibe is that there's some the elites. We don't want the elites telling us what to do and taking our money.
Class.
Right. So but the persons who would typically say, you know what, it's not racism, it's racist people, there's no such thing as power that you really have to worry about, are the same people who are worried about power affecting their taxes or affecting their freedom of speech or their ability to hold guns, or pushing a Marxist agenda in XYZ sort of way. And there's just the concept of power and unjust power affecting how we live and interface with each other, and how our rights are infringed upon. For some people, seem to stop just before racism. Racism is all individual, but all this other stuff, they can understand the systemic nature of it, and they'll even say it like the FBI is coming after Donald Trump, or the DOJ, or okay, so there is a system
that can be
can be used against XYZ person. I'm glad you understand that. There's some racial implications potentially sometimes in that same deal. That's what you're talking about. And so I think it's and the clearest picture of it here in this story is the jury duty story. Or less than an hour. It should take less than an hour to accuse these people to guilty. It's so open and shut, literally open and shut case. Pun intended in this way. And no, it's an hour to say no, never mind.
And that's where I think people kind of comment sometimes on why. We said this on the show, right? So I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's like, okay, so when a black person gets shot by the police officer, there's all this uproar, but when a police officer shoots a white person, there's not this uproar. And like we said, nobody expects justice to not actually be served to the white person,
right?
They expect justice to not be served to the black person, right? And so, and it's stories like Emmitt Till that have created this feeling,
right?
And I want to get away from feeling, right? Because it's just a perception. Like it's stories like Emmitt Till that have created this fact
that reveals
the fear, and really many times the truth of it. It creates a space like, so I don't know if I told you this. For the first time, I got picked for jury duty.
Oh,
I've gotten summoned many times.
Yeah, so you actually did the jury,
but they actually usually I get the summons. And they hey, call in 3 days before, and they'll tell you whether you actually have to come in or you go online, and usually I go online, they're like, denied, get out, we don't want you. I'm like, okay, thank goodness. Recently, I mean, over the last couple of years, I've wanted to be in the jury. I've wanted to do it because it's just such a interesting part of the democracy we live in, and so I go this week. I had it Monday, and I go there, and it's like a whole day where they're trying to choose the jury. It's really fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
You've seen it on Law and Order and the other stuff where you can imagine in the background or in the back rooms, the lawyers, the defense, and the prosecutors are kind of looking at the names of the people who are on, and they're looking at the survey you took, and they're like, okay, we don't want this cat, we want this cat. They get to slice 10 people for no reason at all. They just get to slice 10 people that they don't want. So then you're like, okay, am I on the list? Am I going to be sliced? What's happening? So they ask the jury all these questions. I don't know if anybody's done this, but you just sit there. There's like 70 of us, and they're just asking general questions to the stuff. You're raising your hand, all these different things.
Yeah,
right?
They're taking turns.
Yeah, exactly. Have you done this before?
Yeah.
You've gone through? Okay, so see, I never get picked, so I'm excited about it. But what was so fascinating is, so the defendant was in there. I don't know if that was the case for you. I didn't think that when they were picking the jury that they would have the defendant in there, but our defendant was there, and he was an African-American man who looked very much like me. I was actually sitting outside waiting to go into the courtroom, and this guy comes out. He's like, hey, I need to use the restroom. And I was like, why is he asking if he use the restroom? I thought he was one of the lawyers.
Yeah.
He's dressed up, he's sitting with him, and he's, he's clean cut, all these kinds of things. And then they're like, and this is the client, is what they called him. I was like, wait, that's the defendant. So the case is ultimately, I don't want to give too much away, but I just want to I'm making a point here. So just follow me on this. The accused is being accused of beating his pregnant wife, getting into an altercation, a domestic altercation with his pregnant wife. He grabs her head, allegedly grabs her hair, pulls it, rams her head against a window, and throws her to the ground. His pregnant wife, right? And so I guess this becomes not a felony because of, I can't remember the piece what makes it into a felony. Whatever, it's a felony case. And so we're going through all these questions. They're asking, has anybody ever been sexually or domestically abused? Has anybody ever had an issue with being pregnant, or anybody have a baby? That kind of stuff. But we get to the whole thing, and this is the only time in Texas, the only time you get to talk to lawyers is in this moment. And so at the very end, we have a black judge in this particular district, and get to the end, the judge is like, okay, does anybody have any more questions? And I'm sitting there the whole time going, are we not gonna have any questions about like racial bias? Because think about it, you've got this domestic, so you got family, abuse, aggressiveness, blackmail, aggression in his home. The child's not even born yet,
right?
But there's a child involved.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these are all the little things that people love to say about black men.
Right.
And you've got all these white people in here and some black people, and nobody's asking questions to try to pinpoint whether this man's ability to get a fair trial will be compromised by some kind of bias. So I asked that almost verbatim. And it was almost like they were like, and they were like, but I was trying to help the defendant, the defending lawyer. I'm like, you probably want some of this. And so he's like, well, one of the things we can't do is we can't discriminate about people, how they look and all that. I was like, I know. And he's like, okay, so does anybody have any, literally, and I knew this was the question that was coming, and I was so upset when it came. He's like, does anybody have any racial biases that they think will get in the way of them being,
everybody
fair?
raises their hand.
I know. I was like,
what do
you think? I was waiting because everybody's been raising their hand for other things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just don't want to be there, but nobody raised their hand for this.
Everybody sat on their hand.
Nope. I'm not raising my hand for this one. Right. And so, of course,
anybody would wink.
So blink twice.
That's right. Everybody just gets buck-eyed because they don't want to wink. They're like,
we are recording this and we will share it with the news media. But it was, of course, it was a silly attempt. And I thought, well, that's a dumb, like you should have disingenuous. There should have been much more clever questions to try to at least ascertain some kind of way in which people in the courtroom may have had a relationship with maybe an aggressive black person that might have, done it, or they work with somebody. I don't know, just other questions. So I was really upset. And then when they finally choose the jury at the end, there were 3 black men in the panel, right? These are the people who are going to be selected. When they finally chose the jury, no black men were on that jury. None. When I asked my question, I knew. I was like, either I'm going to be picked or I'm out. Which is the only 2 choices anyway. But I thought either the defending lawyer is going to want to have me on there, right, or they're all going to be like, we added this guy. So I think I might have got cut in the first 10. Like, so you think about it, you get 10 choices.
Pegged you as racially biased.
Correct. Right. Which is fine. But I just needed like, y'all need to, like, this is real. This is a real thing happening.
Somebody's life's at stake.
Somebody's life's at stake. So when you talk about the jury in this case with Emmitt Till, like it's hard. It's hard to believe that the justice system is going to do right. And this is one of the examples of what happened.
And it's one of those things, a lot of people are like, the justice system is right most of the time and that kind of thing. We've referenced Chris Rock twice now. I'm about to.
You gonna do one more?
This is gonna be his.
This is probably not the last one. We're gonna say the next one.
Is this the second or the third?
This is where we kind of mixed them.
But he made a little joke about how some things you get to be right about most of the time, and some things you got to be right about every time. Right? Nobody's. If you're an airplane pilot and you've done, I think this is the example he uses. You've done a lot of flights. But then all of a sudden there's one particular flight where you make a mistake and a bunch of people's lives are lost because that plane crashes. You're probably going to lose you're probably not flying again. You get to make one mistake there. If you're a baseball player, you get to hit 30% of the pitches, and that's good. Yeah. So that's great. If your batting average is 0.35, that's a solid. You can make millions of dollars,
for sure,
missing 65% of the pitches, right? And so there are certain things that really need to get right most of the time, more than most of the time. How our justice system has to be held to a really, really high standard. And we should hold it to a high standard because people's lives and families and entire lineages are affected. Communities and all of that is affected by how we handle, how we handle justice in our judicial system. And so to those persons who are like, well, nothing's perfect. Okay, well, there are some things that we just need to get right. If I told you, hey, the last time, do you want the pilot that never crashed or the one that crashed 3 out of his 500 times?
Yeah.
Give me the never, et cetera, et cetera. You want the doctor that lost a baby. There's certain things
that you want it as close as possible.
That you really need to get. You need to get right, and the judicial system is one of those things. So when we settle for, well, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
With justice, that's an unacceptable place to settle.
Well, and again, with the win some, you lose some, you should at least be able to look at ratios that kind of show that win some, lose some affects everybody collectively almost equally. The problem with, again, the justice system in some ways, historically, and even some
modern, we have to see what it's like modern day.
But
we expect that we expect it to be slowly improving, but not quite there.
Unless you're not allowed to evaluate it because people keep calling
unless no one
evaluates it. I'm not going to get into that, but right, because even if you look at the prison system, right, we are like 5% of the world's population, but we have a quarter of the people in prison. We have the most people in prison, right? And then of that particular group of people who are in prison, Black people are 12.5% of the population, but 40% of the prison population. And again, there's people out there going, well, Black people are more prone to crime and prone to do things. That's if I can say BS on this show, which I just did, so I guess I can say it's my show. I can do what I want. It's about what people are criminalizing in so many ways.
Yeah, that and we should revisit that conversation future, because I just had I had a conversation with a guy recently that I'm having a lot of conversations with, same guy, and he's a young guy, probably in his late 20s, white guy struggling with the economy right now, struggling with how expensive things are.
Yeah.
And the promise of meritocracy, you go, you work, you get to college, you do your degree, you get a job, and you work hard, and you're supposed to have progress towards the American dream.
That sounds cute.
He's like, man, I am working my tail off, and I cannot get ahead, right? I cannot find anywhere to go. The system seems to be against me. And then he said to me, I now understand a little bit why people might want to sell drugs. He's like, because if I can, I can't make the money I need to survive. But, if people, and this isn't, I'm not promoting selling drugs. I'm talking what this young man was talking to me about.
Sure.
He's like, he had now an understanding that crime is not people trying to destroy society a lot of times. Sometimes some people are just trying to watch it burn. That, right? Sometimes it's that. But for others, crime turns out to be the avenue of survival.
Sure.
And because there isn't other means of survival, or they don't believe there to be, or this, something isn't working. And we need to make the differentiation between seeing a society that's filled with crime. Is that because all those people are depraved, or is it because those people are needing to survive? Or deprived.
Ooh, come on now. That's some pastor work. Hey, hold up. I'm writing it down. It's mine. I finished it. So it's mine.
Or deprived.
We'll say we worked it together.
Hey, we did it together. It's a product of color company. But depraved or deprived. Yeah, it's a good thing, because people will resort to the crime because they got to eat, and they're trying to figure out how to move forward in life. And that's the wrong choice. We don't want crime, but this young man was like, I'm not about to go and sell drugs, but I can see now, why someone might decide to go in that direction, because the pathway that I was given, that I was told,
right,
that was supposed to lead to the way to live well.
Ain't working.
Doesn't seem to be working for me, and the people for who seems to be in charge of it, they don't seem to be caring very much if that is not working. They're telling me, hey, you're just an entitled millennial who expects the world to be given to them. And he's like, no, I got all this receipts for work. I just need for, I need for it to matter more and for it to produce better benefit, better result. So it's an interesting thing. So crime and moving things forward, like, we can do a show about that. But what does it all mean? And I think crime should tell us. It's almost like we're fathers, right?
Yes.
So it's almost like when we look at our children and they start to behave in a certain way, we can start asking the question, well, of course, sometimes that's just them needing to be, taught and disciplined. And sometimes you're like, wait a minute, what's really behind that?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm not around enough. You need attention. Okay. So that's about attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I could address the behavior, or I can address me giving you more attention, to deal with the thing that would produce this outcome. Right. And we don't always think about our societies those kind of ways.
Well, it sounds like maybe the next color commentary. It's good to engage, and and crimes are committed. And this particular scenario of which Emmitt Till is a crime they're committed, and it's one that's a great representation of a revealing representation of white supremacy, racism, and really political and systemic racism as well. And part of what's happening that the president has issued this day, and not just today, but also this creation of these monuments that would go 3 different ones. One at the side of the river where Emmitt Till's body was believed to be found, which they already have one there, but it gets shot up a lot. Like people walk by, hit it, shoot it up, whatever. So these are federally funded monuments, which means they will be kept up and protected in different ways than maybe a county or city can do it. But one on the side of the river there, but then there's also one at the courthouse where this jury was acquitted. A jury acquitted these men, and then one at the church, the Roberts Temple Church of Christ, I think is what it was. Church of God in Christ.
Church of God in Christ. The church that was in the story.
The church that was in the story.
Yeah. Church of God in Christ.
It'll be there as well, and I think they're even going to renovate the church so that it's a better monument for that. So I know we've had an episode on monuments before, and one of the things I said in that episode that I think is apt here. I haven't, as of the last decade or so, been really all that excited about monuments or memorials that are about honoring people. But I'm definitely in on things that are honoring moments and events, because I feel like that's long term. You don't have people don't stand up to it.
Right.
Eventually you're like, oh, that person sold drugs once, or they had an affair, or or they had 1,000 slaves, which is most of the monuments in lots of places. So
it's always the third thing.
It came to me right out. I was only going to do 2, and then I felt like I needed 3.
Instinct
I do. It's
the third thing is going to be punchy.
That's right. So so I've always been about moments, which is like I like the downtown Birmingham and a lot of stuff that's down there. And I think this is good too.
Did you see that monument that it's not a monument, that mural, I guess it is.
Okay.
On the Texas Capitol.
The one that you were posting about. Yeah, absolutely.
I was really surprised by that. We stumbled on it. Like we were just walking, and
it's a big thing. I had never seen it. I've been to Austin several times. I haven't seen it.
I'm sure it's come up, but I'm surprised that we don't know more.
What was talk a little bit about like what that?
Well, it was a to your point. It wasn't one person.
Yeah.
It was a collective monument about a collective mural about the influence or the story of Black persons in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Sure. And so it's a collection of things front and back.
Oh, okay. I don't know if I saw that.
And it's anyway, very interesting. Sitting there on the Capitol, well done.
Yeah.
In the Capitol lawn. So I was proud to see that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I like to see those things sort of captured from a momentary standpoint because it reminds us of something that happened in that time frame. This particular story of Emmitt Till, you know, a lot of people, when they talk about it's been given this sort of moniker as the spark that lit the civil rights movement. Um, a lot of people think about Rosa Parks not sitting down on the bus, and Montgomery bus boycott, and all that's there. But one of the things that when they've interviewed Rosa Parks, she said she had this in her mind, Emmitt Till in her mind, as she sat and did that, which goes to one I think is a really beautiful part of the story is that it really was this mother that did this, who sacrificed in some ways the privacy, the pride, to let the world see. I mean, belabored his burial, got him from being buried in Mississippi, brought him to Chicago, put him on display, got Jet Magazine to come in, take pictures. Like this Black woman just, if you run through the civil rights movement, it do some just not tertiary, that's not the word, just a little bit of research in there. I know we get a lot of characters, we get a lot of male characters, but these Black women, they're just absolutely the spark, I think, that made it through. Rosa Parks obviously is one that people know, but this story about Mamie Mobley here is a powerful piece, and I'm excited to that they're creating this and that we're getting to see these. These are the kind of monuments that help the next generation, if we're allowed, to know where we have been. I think President Biden said this, like, we got to know all of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I don't want to make it sound like this is a silver lining, right? I don't want, because we got other stuff in the news that's talking about the silver lining of some of the things historically, right? I mean, do you see that? Like,
yeah. The stuff coming out of Florida, for those of you who have seen some of that, and if you're following me on Facebook, you may have saw me post some things about it. But it wasn't DeSantis, but it's the board. There's a education board that developed a curriculum, and it made the news because the curriculum standards say that African Americans received some, quote, personal benefit from slavery. And when you hear that, you say, what? Or you just spit all the coffee out of your mouth, then that is the appropriate reaction. And so there's a conversation around that. Now, of course, that's a headline. So one of the things that we try to do is, dig into the paragraphs. And so to be fair about those standards, Megyn Kelly did an interview with one of the persons I think were on the curriculum board, and it was a Black person who she interviewed. And the essence of that interview was that these standards this line was there to articulate the facts that persons who were in various forms of slavery during that slavery learned various types of skills or trades. And once those Black persons were freed, those skills were able to be used to establish whatever business or whatever skills they could sell, they could, get work for or what have you. And so the statement isn't meant to be, hey, there's some really cool stuff that comes out of slavery. It was more just a factual statement that those are things that slaves used to move forward. And so that's the justification of the line. But even with that justification, I'm out.
Why are you out? Like, what are you out on?
I think you have to be more careful with that. And here's what I told a friend of mine. With Florida particularly, you're not going to get benefit of the doubt. Now, what you said is factually true and all of that. But the problem here is you have decided that you're going to ban books, that you're going to turn off other voices, and that you're going to control the narrative. That's literally what you're saying. To be, quote unquote, anti-woke is to not give certain voices an opportunity to speak into what has happened. What you're going to say is we're not woke, so we're the ones who know all the things. And the sort of things that you're banning are the sort of things that would further expand what slavery is and what it meant to Black persons and to the country. And so after you've told me that I can no longer listen to this historical content, you're now going to come and give me some content that does reveal the ugliness, some of the ugliness of slavery, but then throw in a little line on the back end of it that allows for a teacher to say, hey, but it wasn't all bad, because if it wasn't for slavery, these shoemakers wouldn't be able to make shoes. And heaven forbid they didn't learn how to make shoes, because then they wouldn't know how to live in this society, right? By providing that wiggle room for a room of teachers whom you have handpicked, who are in agreement with the banning of books and the furthering and protection of the white narrative, the likelihood is that you're going to major on that particular line and minor on the ugliness of slavery. And because of that, that makes this, while it on the surface may feel like these are just the facts, I think it indicates a deeper motive. And if that's not true, you have to pardon me for not trusting you. Pardon me for not trusting you after you shut out every other voice and then decided to insert your own as the sole voice here. And I don't care if it's a Black person or a white person or a Hispanic. I don't know who it is. There's no room for saying that slavery in any capacity was beneficial. That's your word. That's the problem. That was beneficial. Now, Black people and other people across the world who are in tough scenarios are able to, as we say, take lemons and make lemonade. And we'd have made a lot of lemonade, and we'd have made money.
Palmer,
and we'd have made you little something.
British. I'm thinking if they're in Britain with the slaves, they put a little tea in it. So I'm like an Arnold Palmer. Sweet tea Arnold Palmer.
Do a little something else. Yeah, sweet tea. But we have turned it up like jazz, soul food, hip hop culture. So much of the coolness of Black is lemonade, right? Mm-hmm. And so we would say that to ourselves. Yeah, we took some stuff that we had to do, and we made do with what we had. That's that makes that statement, factually true. But slow down now. Hey, that ain't the move. So I think they need to be more careful with their wording. I don't think they need that line at all. No, I don't think they need that. I think we need something that sounds a little more like perseverance, that sounds a little more like attributing the way that Black persons took what they had and turned it into something they could work out of, that was what Black persons did, not that it was a benefit provided to them by the experience from the white persons or the oppressors. If you're going to write a line about how, I want to say God, it's not God here, but how the situation was redeemed.
Yeah, well,
then we could talk about how, man, we took bad things and we made something out of it. But benefit sounds like something someone was given, and it's just the wrong language. So I think that'd be careful. So soapbox. I'm off the soapbox for a second.
Get your soapbox because I'm disagreeing with you.
Oh, he said he's on the other side. There is a benefit to slavery.
Well, I didn't say that.
I'm just joking.
I didn't say that.
He said, slow down.
Slow down now. Look, if you're gonna talk about, let's just be real. If you are okay with talking about the benefits of slavery, then tell all the benefits. See, the reason why they wanted to take all the history out of the books, all this stuff, is because they didn't want the real history to be told about the actual benefits of slavery to white people. That's the benefits, right? Like, talk about all the benefits, right? The fact that people were able to make millions of dollars off of the back of free labor. And in a country that's a capitalist country, in which money is really the central idol that grows in unstoppable ways, and also creates a debt in unstoppable ways, like, the formula is already there.
Yeah.
Those who had slaves, who bought land, built banks, those families are benefiting from slavery.
Yeah.
That is a systemic racism that happened, and nobody wants to admit that America has benefited from slavery, but they want to all of a sudden talk about that black people benefited from slavery.
Slaves benefited from slavery.
So I'm all in. As long as we put all the benefits and we make a chart. Let's make a chart. Like white people benefits, slave benefits. Just put it on a chart. Do that in the classroom, and then I'm all in on it. But the problem is, again, they were the very people who were like, you can't talk about all the banks, the Bank of Americas and the INGs and the Chase. You can't talk about how they benefited and how all their children are benefiting. You can't talk about the systemic benefits of just being white in this country, which means you could not be put as a slave after about 1803, somewhere there, where they changed it, where only people of color, black people, could be enslaved. You didn't talk about that benefit of just being white in society. We just talked about Emmitt Till and his family not being able to stop two men from coming to the house and taking their child. The benefit was that they were white and the black people were black and they couldn't do anything about it. So just being white had the benefit of you being able to walk around and take people's children and beat them to death.
Right.
I mean, so let's talk about the benefits. So be all in on the benefit conversation. And I'm with you, like lemons to lemonade. God making a way out of no way, God redeeming the sinfulness of a whole society, that allowing other people to do it. If you're going to talk about benefits, what happened once they got out of slavery with those tools and trades?
Right.
What were they allowed to do with these tools and trades? Were they allowed to own their own business? No. Were they allowed to walk around and start their own business? No. Did they have to have papers that had them attached to some white person's business so that they didn't get arrested and put in jail, so they could be treated like a slave because the 13th Amendment didn't protect them if they were in prison? I like that they started it.
Well, it ain't gonna go that way, bro.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Like, if they want to do it, like, keep it going.
Yeah. All is not well that ends well. And that's what this is. It's like, hey, slavery happened, and so ugly, but all's well that ends well, right?
That's right.
Like slow down. No. All is not well.
No,
that ends well.
As Paul Harvey used to say, and the rest of the story.
And the rest of the story. So that was in the news, and it's still happening. It was like a week ago, and it turns out bipartisan voices are decrying this, which is helpful. Now,
when you say bipartisan, you got like Republicans, if you will.
We had Kamala Harris give her retort to it.
Sure.
And
because it was against Florida, it's heavily Republican. DeSantis and his group.
Yeah. So and then you had but just today, we're starting to see a series of Republican voices also say, I think the line I saw was, "There's no silver lining to slavery."
Yes.
Which no, there isn't.
Is this a moment? Because I'm continuing to kind of lean in and try to understand fragility in all of its opportunities. So there's
the fragile just got hurt by using the word fragility. I'm just saying.
Fragile. Okay, fragility.
Is it okay? I feel like what I'm about to say is an attack. It's not an attack, but
an attack on whom?
On the fragile person. There's a part of me that's like, hey, if you just heard fragility and you got upset,
you are fragile.
Just the word fragility and you got upset.
But here's what the point I'm making is, I think everybody has a layer of fragility. Everybody does.
Okay.
Right.
I do.
And
I got some.
You can just do it with triggers. You know what I mean? Just when you get triggered, and everybody gets it. White people aren't the only ones who get triggered. Black people get triggered too.
Yes, absolutely.
This moment, what you're talking about, is a trigger.
That it
right?
It was.
Yeah. And so yes. And yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We're on the same page. So we're all in this together, that we all have the ability to get triggered.
We're all fragile.
There's just levels of fragility. So if I can say to that group that's in Florida, they are triggered by the word fragility. Their fragility level is at a 1, let's just say. Black people who are getting triggered by the idea of slavery having some sort of benefits is higher. It's 5, 6, whatever. Like it took a while to get to that. Like it wasn't just that they were talking about slavery. Like it had to be there. So
for the record, and I read the article, waited 4 or 5 days.
Okay. And you're still triggered.
3 or 4 days. No, before I said anything, because I know. And I had to let stuff simmer and chill. And then after 4 days, I was still like, nah, I can't.
But I think it's interesting because again, it's just
even then I just
we are
on the top.
I know.
Just a little something.
Because what we're talking about is if there's some semblance of a truth and a fact in what they're talking about, which is why they're fighting for.
That's the facts.
Is because it is a fact that because somebody learns a trade, they get to use it later. That's a fact. No matter what the context is, if you learn a trade and you use it later, you have benefited from learning it. Right. If you learn how to be a slave owner, that trait connects to down the road learning how to be maybe a CEO of a corporation. And so it's a trade that people learn. Now, the context of where the trade was learned, why it was learned, and how it is used is where we need to have the conversation. And I think it's like, if you're at the level 1 fragility, right, where you don't even want people talking about history of Black people in this country, then you're going to find the level 1 fact as well, because that level 1 fact allows you to live in the midst, protect yourself from the level 1 fragility. The fact that you can go, every time slavery is talked about, you get fragile, but if you can just fight it and go, yes, but the trades they learned help them, then you've just given your level 1 fact. What we need is we need to concentrate on level 10 facts, right? And then grow to a level 10 fragility. That's what we need to do. But maybe this is a growth, right? But I'm with what I said. I stand by what I said. I don't mind a level 1 fact as long as we keep adding 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10
the
facts.
conversation reminds, I know we're gonna wrap up, but the conversation reminds me of the line, and I know there may be a lot of people who feel this way, and so I've decided that I do not. People say, man, I live and I don't have any regrets. That's what people say, a lot of times. I don't have any regrets. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things, but all of my mistakes made me who I am.
I've had some
bad days. Yeah. But they're like, hey, no regrets. I would do everything exactly the way I did it before because it made me who I am today. That's a very popular line.
Sure.
And I'm like, no, there were definitely some things I would go back and not do. Because the end doesn't justify the means. Like who I am today, if I could learn how to be who I am today quicker, if I could get there faster, I don't like it. A personal look. It's difficult for me to say that because I've become this, these bad things were worth it. That I made, and some things that might be true. Some pain produces that, but I don't think that's a blanket statement. And America, looking at its history, can't say, hey, we look back at our history and we're glad we did all of it because it made us who we are today. Nah, that ain't the move. You're not gonna be able to say as an American,
because you're trying to think who's the we.
Yeah, but
who gets to call the we?
Well, let's just say it's the multi-ethnic, multicultural. Like let's say anybody. Like you just look back and there's got to be things that you're like, you know what? If we could do this again, we wouldn't do, because if you're going to say that slavery was beneficial to an individual, to us or to the slave, and what that makes room for is that slavery was beneficial for the country and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We wouldn't be who we are without slavery. Then what you're saying is that if you could go back and do it again, that you probably wouldn't
change
slavery. And I don't find that as an acceptable way to think. Yes, America should have regrets, even if it is been redeemed, even if we are drinking the lemonade of it, right? And I think it's fine for us to live into that and say, hey, we shouldn't have did that. And even if it means that we won't be who we are today, we shouldn't have done that. It was the wrong thing to do. And this statement feels like, maybe we shouldn't have done it, but it worked out. It worked out for everybody, didn't it? Didn't it kind of work out for everybody? So,
Right.
and that ain't, that's not how you grow. That's not how that's not the move for me. So I,
Well, I think
personally, I have regrets, if you will. I have regrets.
regrets.
I have regrets. I have regrets to 2 weeks ago. You're like, hey man, would you have said, like, you know what? If I could rehab that conversation,
Yeah.
I would say it this way instead of that way. Yes, of course I have regrets. There are things that I would go back and change and do differently. And we don't need to, try to spin everything forward like that. So
Like where we are today
that's what keeps us at the level 1 fragility, where we're
Yeah.
like, ooh, it hurts a little bit. Can somebody help me? Oh, it ended well. Okay. Ooh,
right.
I don't have to feel bad about that. No. It happened to end well this time, but there's a lot of death and blood and tears and that happened along the way that didn't need to, that was needless. And we got to be able to look at that and learn from that.
Yeah.
That's what the whole thing is, right? And begin to craft a new future that doesn't include those decisions. Otherwise, we just make decisions and keep trying to make the best of them. And then taking the best and leaving the worst and acting like the worst didn't happen. That's not the way you move forward.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, even thinking full circle about it, yes, Emmitt Till's death, funeral sparked a civil rights movement that would ultimately lead to the fact that you and I would be born in the first generation of African Americans to ever have all of our rights and privileges. But should there have ever been a generation where we didn't?
Right.
How do you think Mamie Till Mobley feels? There should have never been a need for her to show her battered and beaten son at a funeral to 125,000 people just to get the country to listen to the rights and the terrorism that her family was experiencing in the South. Didn't need any of that. Emmitt Till should have never had to be beaten and be accosted in the middle of the night for whistling at a white person. His family should have never been fearful of having him there and having to control his movements at all. There should have never been a society where we had that kind of interaction amongst us relationally. So those are negative things. And if you go even further back, like,
and it's okay to say
it's okay. Well,
things.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like this is called laments.
Yeah.
Which is a practice. It's a biblical practice. I mean, do we look back and go, man, I'm so glad Adam and Eve sinned because all's well that ends well? So no, I mean, I think I understand, like, there's some learning, all the stuff that comes along with it, the silver lining that we put on to all that stuff. But man, wouldn't it be great if we could just live in a society where we respected one another, loved one another, and followed after God in the ways that He's asked us to do? Isn't ultimately that what we're trying to head toward?
Right.
So where we're living is not good. I'm sorry to say it out loud. I know people are going, that's a negative thing. No, I'm sorry. God has given us a vision of something much greater. And so this life that we're living in, we keep trying to restore it. We keep trying to make it the perfect life. And part of the way we make it the perfect life is to ignore the imperfections of it, but that doesn't make it perfect. It just makes you ignoring the imperfections. God has given us an opportunity to demonstrate a more perfect version of this imperfect life and to point people towards a time of new heaven and new earth of perfect, which is a return to what it was when it started. So if it's not good, it means it can always get better, and we can lament all the reasons why it didn't get good.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
repent and confess. Really, repentance or saying I'm sorry should be me saying, I wish I had never done that.
Sure. I mean,
you know what? I did that or I said that. I'm sorry. It hurt you, and I should never have done it.
Right.
That's what that should be.
And
I regret doing it.
I regret doing it. And then whatever pain it caused, I would like to restore that pain.
Yeah.
Right. As best I can. How do I make it right?
Yeah.
How do I make it right?
That's what, just very simple concepts.
Simple concepts, biblical concepts. For those of you who are like, man, you guys talk about race and it's nothing to do with the gospel or Jesus and anything. It's like, no, these are biblical concepts. Like,
whose voice are you using now?
It's Johnny. Don't you know Johnny? I'm just making up names.
No, there's always, I got a few of those.
Oh, you got
voices
some
myself.
Johnnies?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
it's a series of voices
Tommy.
depending on who I'm talking about. What I'm talking about.
It's
This
Clark.
is the gospel. The gospel is God's love in action. Jesus started it, and he ran first. But the gospel is running. It's moving. It's active. It's not a static concept. So yeah, when we're talking about what's the gospel, we're just talking about the gospel. Yes, we're talking about what it means to love well, to love each other well, to love like Jesus loved, who didn't sit still, but was moving and active and interfacing and changing and redeeming.
Yes, you can't redeem,
reconnecting those things which have been broken. That's what this conversation ultimately is about, especially to the church.
Yeah, you can't redeem if you don't believe that something's broken,
right?
Unless you acknowledge something's broken.
Yeah.
A good convo, bro.
Right.
Glad we can get in and kind of talk a little bit about these things that are going on in our space and our community. Excited for our listeners. Thank you for jumping in and kind of hanging with us for a little bit. Those of you who are threaded folks, we're excited. Continue to be excited about coming alongside not just individuals, but organizations. We've got a lot of churches out there that are trying to not just really become a multi-ethnic church, but trying to do justice in their community well. And so we like to come alongside churches. It's part of one of the services we offer. Come alongside churches, not to help them become a multi-ethnic church, although that's great, but to really see the multi-ethnic church in the local community come alive and work together collaboratively with the community to make change and bring transformation. And so we help churches do that over a period of time. So if you need that, if you got a church home that's looking for a little help with that, give us a call. Contact us. wearethreaded.org. You can come in there and send us a message. Let us know what's going on out there. For the rest of you, thank you being here. Being a part of Colored Commentary, 6th season. If you know you've been around, Colored is not about the color of the host's skin, as we started this off with, but it's about giving you a chance to see through the different lenses that are out there, the different colorful lenses that God has intentionally put into the world, those perspectives that give us the full tapestry of the image of God. And so this is an opportunity for us to look through those lenses. And so as we are here and we are looking through those lenses, we continue to remind you as you go out into your world, look through those lenses and stay colored.
You have been listening to Colored Commentary, powered by Threaded, a biblical reconciliation organization. To find out more about Threaded, check out wearethreaded.org. And to join the show for live recordings and other events, subscribe to our YouTube channel or check us out at coloredcommentary.com.